The show where there are no penalties, nothing is offside, and everything is fair game. This is The Gloves Are Off.
Hello, sports fans. This is The Gloves Are Off. Lance Phillips and Josh Ryan. What's up, buddy?
No Andrew Brethauer today.
No Andrew Brethauer today, or anytime soon, actually. You are the new man in the hot seat.
Indeed. It's exciting times. I'm not too nervous as much as I thought it would be. Definitely thought it would be a little bit more nerve-wracking, but I'm excited to do this almost every week.
We are excited to have you here as well.
Thanks.
And we might as well get started. We've got some football, we got some Alberta, Battle of Alberta, all kinds of good stuff. Let's start with the AFC and NFC championships that are starting this coming weekend. Who is the most impressive going into this? You've got the Pack, you got the Patriots, the Falcons, and of course, who am I missing?
Oh, sorry, you're missing the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I am missing the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
Who did you find the most impressive after this last weekend and going into the championship round?
Well, if you want to talk about just team success, you have to go with the Patriots. 6 straight appearances in the AFC Championship game. Obviously, in an opportunity to have a sweet little revenge deal against Roger Goodell with the way Deflategate went down. But just in terms of getting to the championship game this year, you got to say it's the Packers. I mean, the team is so depleted in terms of injuries. So many receivers who are, according to advanced metrics anyway, below league average, and yet Aaron Rodgers keeps getting it done every year.
It is impressive. They no Jordy Nelson in the divisional game. They've gone 8 straight wins. I mean, the teams they defeated. I mean, run the table essentially. The Eagles, the Texans, the Seahawks, Bears, Vikings, Lions, Giants, and now the Cowboys. 5 of those teams are above 500. What an impressive run. I think that is the team to beat for the remainder of this playoff season.
And you have to look at as well, Dallas was kind of the perennial contender of the league. Everyone really put their money on the Cowboys in terms of their total roster with 2 MVP candidates between Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott. And yet the Packers were able to kind of maintain Elliott throughout the game, and Aaron Rodgers just clearly outdueled Prescott. Yeah,
I mean, and even the Falcons, Matt Ryan's having a career year. Julio Jones, Devonta Freeman, just another star-studded lineup there. New England is, well, New England. I mean, they're always in the mix. The Steelers, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown. It seems like the Packers just don't have this type of weaponry this time around, but they do have Aaron Rodgers. And that throw he made to Randall Cobb was probably one of the best throws I've ever seen. A 38-yard strike, running the wrong way, and he threw it on the money. Nobody was catching that except Cobb, and he made an incredible catch. I've never seen anything quite like that.
I think you can call Aaron Rodgers the master of the Hail Mary at this point. Even when it's not a true Hail Mary where he's in his own end zone chucking the ball as far as he can, he still finds a way to come up with these miraculous throws in the dying seconds of games, in completely the most important moments of games. And obviously, they're perfect throws, too. They're always right on the money for the receivers.
Just an incredible performance on the weekend. I mean, I still cannot get over that throw. That was better than the Jeff Janis throw from last year. And that was impressive.
I would agree with you as well. I think.
Packers. You got the Packers?
I do have the Packers. I like the Falcons, and even though Matty Ice has been great for the Falcons, I'm sorry, I got to go with Aaron Rodgers. You can't bet against him at this point. He said he was going to run the table. So far, he's run the table.
All right. The Battle of Alberta is back, or is it? Calgary and Edmonton, for 35 years, have had some incredible battles. I mean, battles as it pertains to the playoffs, but battles in the fisticuffs department as well. Is this back? Are we seeing a renewed rivalry between these two teams?
I think so. I think, one, because the two teams are actually good finally.
That's the biggest key.
You've had 2 teams that have really played poorly for the past couple of years, and they've been in rebuild mode. I mean, the Oilers have been in rebuild mode since they lost in the Stanley Cup final in 2006. But also, it's not just that they are finally good again. They're both in playoff contention. They're also both young and exciting. Obviously, you've got McDavid, you've got Eberle, you've got Nugent Hopkins. But on the Calgary side, you still have Sean Monahan, Johnny Gaudreau, who's one of the most exciting small forwards in the game. Great players like Giordano, Brody. And finally, both teams, since the days of Kiprusoff and Rolison, they have goaltenders that they're happy with, Chad Johnson and Brian Elliott over in Calgary. And then you also got Cam Talbot over in Edmonton. So I think just the fact that both teams are exciting in the way that they were in the 80s. Remember in the 80s, those two were the two most dynamic teams in the league.
In the late 80s and early 90s, the teams were dynamic and they were fierce. That was the most heated rivalry, and I would say all of sports. I would say in all of sports that was the most heated rivalry, and then as you mentioned, it dropped off a bit because the teams became lackluster.
Yeah.
They haven't met in the playoffs since '91, and that's, I feel like, what these two teams need to really get this going again is another playoff meeting.
And it's certainly possible.
It is possible.
One team in the wild cards position right now, another team in, I believe the Oilers are third in the Pacific Division right now. If either of those teams could jump one or two spots, they could end up within that range of maybe the second and third seed matchup. Maybe the Oilers win the division and the Flames are one of the higher wild card seeds and they play them in that first round. And yeah, just it would be really exciting. I mean, Oilers and Flames fans, even through the bad years, have still hated each other. And now that they have something to really play for, I mean, this rivalry has been compared to Packers-Bears, has been compared to Lakers-Celtics as one of the great, not just hockey rivalries, sports rivalries of all time. And seeing it again means something instead of just two teams on the build playing at the end of the season is really exciting.
Well, we saw a great game against these two teams the other night.
Yes.
And this is what has spurned this conversation, is what that game was. It was excellent. And I just can't wait to see what the rest of this season brings between these two teams. I mean, they don't have quite the same figures they had, back in the day when Marty McSorley was an Oiler. Joel Otto played for the Flames. They don't have those kinds of guys, those rough and tumble kind of guys, quite the same. But what we saw the other night bodes well for the rivalry between these two teams.
Absolutely, and it kind of reflects the changing of the game as well. I mean, when you look back at the 80s, the rules were a lot different then. And the type of guys were a lot different. The enforcer's almost been phased out at this point, but yet when you see an intense game, sometimes there's scuffles in front of the net, things like that, but a lot of it is just comes into the speed of the game, how hard they're hitting each other, and the noise of the building. And you saw that on Saturday between the two teams. A lot of people are now looking forward to this next week where they play in Calgary, where obviously the Flames will look for a little bit of redemption and look to bounce back up in the standings with a win. Again, it'll come down a little bit. I think the one spot on both teams that people are unsure about is goaltending a little bit.
That is a bit of an uncertainty with both those teams, for sure.
But I think the fact that Calgary's starting to get more consistency from both Elliott and Chad Johnson bodes well for them. Although Talbot has been much more stable than he was last year for the Oilers.
Yeah, it's I can't wait to see these teams battle again. And if we could get back to where they were in the 80s, oh man, like hockey fans would be in for a treat. And anyone who watched these teams in the 80s, if you saw this happen in the 80s, they know what to expect. I mean, it's one of the best rivalries, and it continues to be one of the best. It's better than Leafs Senators, better than Leafs Canadiens as far as I'm concerned.
Which we could see as well. We have a possibility of seeing multiple Canadian teams in the playoffs this year after everyone missed last year. So that would be especially exciting to see multiple rivalries going.
That would be good for Canada, that is for sure. Coming up on the other side, Eugenie Bouchard. Is she back? We'll find out. She's doing pretty well at the Aussie Open. Josh Ryan here. Eugenie Bouchard had a good opening round at the Aussie Open, getting past American Luisa Chirico, pardon me. 56 minutes it took her, Josh Ryan. And this is kind of the Eugenie Bouchard of old. Is she back to her old self?
I think it's too small a sample size to say, yes, she's back to her old self. But there are positive signs. One, as you said, looking more like her old self. She plays a very aggressive style of play where she hits a lot of aggressive, right down to the line shots, which leaves open when she's struggling to making a lot of errors, but it scores a lot more winners being that aggressive. Also, just her conditioning. She's looked fitter than she has in a long time. She had a eating disorder that she struggled with during all the fame and all the publicity she was doing outside of tennis. And just the fact that she won in less than an hour and now has a match coming up tonight against Peng, who's ranked, I believe, 84th or something like that in the world. that's pretty well set up for her to make it to the third round, where she will face Angelique Kerber if she makes it that far.
Yeah.
That's a pretty tough matchup, number one ranked player in the world. But just getting to the third round in her first major tournament of the year, after already getting to a semifinal at the Sydney International before the tournament, that's about as good a start as you can get, considering how rough 2 years she's had.
And that was a great warm-up to the Aussie Open. As you mentioned, she's dealt with eating disorders. That concussion caused her a ton of grief.
Yes.
But even worse than that is the fact that what's caused her the most grief is the fame as far as her beauty is concerned. Yeah. This has been an ongoing issue in the 2015 Aussie Open. The reporter, instead of asking about her win that actually put her into the semifinals, he asked her to do a twirl.
Yeah.
And she obliged him. Like, you can't, he shouldn't be asking that, first of all. But secondly, she's got to say, I'm not doing any twirl. And she got so caught up in that part of her game, if you will, it caused her a ton of grief. And until she gets rid of that side, she's going to continue to struggle.
And I think you're starting to see some, not backlash, but rather a response to that in terms of the recent Sportsnet article where they interviewed her right one-on-one before the Aussie Open, where she said, basically, I don't care what you guys think. She was getting a lot of flack on when she posted on Instagram she went on holiday somewhere, and people were going, why aren't you training? Why aren't you putting in the work? And she's essentially saying, you guys don't see the work I do every day, so I'm going to post what I want. And that kind of defiance is maybe a good sign that she's not
right?
she's not. I think it's a sign that she's like not worrying about how she looks, and she's not worrying about what people think of how she looks, because she was getting a lot of her endorsement deals from that. She's focusing more on tennis,
and that's key.
And so far, her early play has shown that. So it'd be nice to see her come back onto the rise and meet up again with Milos Raonic, who's obviously doing very well on the men's side.
Yeah, and I think he just before we came on set here, he was winning his first round matchup. And as a third-ranked player, third-seeded player, Milos Raonic, he's in a great situation in this Aussie Open.
Absolutely. He's really positioned well. If he can get through his first couple rounds easily enough, he only has Gael Monfils in the quarterfinal matchup, and then does have Novak Djokovic in his semis. But winning straight sets today obviously goes a long way to putting him on the right path. And he's, again, continues to get fitter every single year. He's transformed a lot in 5 years.
Back to Bouchard for a second. You mentioned the focus on tennis, which is clearly more important than the focus on Instagram.
Yes.
But there needs to be, as you mentioned as well, more proof that she is playing back to the way she was, and we're not there yet. A first round win over American Louise Chirico.
Small sample size.
Very, and it doesn't. She still needs to prove that she can get at least a third round entry for her. At least gets the conversation rolling again.
Yeah, and earns her points in terms of her overall ranking in the WTA.
For sure it is. NBA All-Star Voting. It's over. And a guy that's been hotly debated is a guy that you're familiar with, Zaza Pachulia.
Yeah.
He's probably in, considering voting ended last night at 11:59, and he was second in voting for front court players on the West Side. We have had this discussion before
and I'm very, very looking forward to this.
About whether or not these types of players deserve a spot in the All-Star game. We saw this with in the NHL, of course, and now the NBA has a similar situation. Do you like the idea of Zaza Pachulia getting in?
I personally don't. And it really depends on what you want from your All-Star voting process. Do you want the fans to have control, first of all? But do you want the event to represent something very fun, wacky, and different from the NBA season? Then in that case, it's fine. I mean, the John Scott thing worked out. It ended up working out very well. It was huge for the NHL. But I've always saw the All-Star game as you're voting in the players that deserve to be there, that are the best players in the game that year. And if you look at Zaza Pachulia, he's a fine average NBA player, but not an All-Star. Even Dwayne Wade, who has been he's going to be a Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Fame player, is not an All-Star based on his work this season. But it's become a popularity contest. And that's why I like that the NBA going forward is going to shift into more of a balanced process where writers and the players can actually vote in along with the fans. But it's just these, essentially with Zaza Pachulia, you're either voting in because you think his name sounds funny because he's not a typical American name, or you think it's just funny the idea of him starting in the NBA when most people know he doesn't deserve to start in the NBA All-Star game.
Okay, so I've heard about enough of that.
Okay.
The game is for fans. The game is for the fans. So if you have a process where you're allowing fan voting, Why on earth would you want to undermine that with a new system that essentially pulls that vote out of the fans' hands? There's no reason for that. And the NHL tried to do this by pulling the fan vote out of the fan hands, by not allowing John Scott into the game. He was traded, sent down, eventually came in. And as you said, huge success. I'm not understanding why these leagues do not allow fans to have their say. It's a meaningless game, so why are they assigning a meaning to a voting process?
I do agree that in a large sense it is a meaningless game until they offer financial incentives to, give players a chance to play, give them a reason to want to try hard in the game. But at the same time, it's not necessarily that fans across the country want John Scott to be in the game. It's because a dedicated group of enough fans spend enough time on Twitter retweeting the same retweet enough that they get a movement going. And so to me, it's ultimately social media interaction is not the perfect representation of what fans in the country actually think.
But if the fans in the country actually thought that Pachulia shouldn't be in the game, and say a guy like Cousins should be in the game,
not all of them are on Twitter, though.
That they would vote for Cousins.
Not all.
No, but a large majority of the population is on Twitter, and if they don't want a certain guy in the game, they have the opportunity to vote him out. And he wasn't voted out. He was not. Somebody didn't overtake him. I like the fact that leagues put this in the fans' hands. What I don't like is they're trying to take it out. So it's one or the other. The game is not for the fans, in which case, why on earth would fans tune in to watch it? Or it is for the fans, and you have to deal with who they vote in. The other part of this is, what's the most important thing to any league? The single most important thing.
I suppose it might have something to do with money.
It's revenue. And if you're going to get fans watching a game because a non-typical guy is playing in an all-star game, it's going to generate more revenue. It's going to generate way more ad revenue, considering you have the ratings for the game. Why are you trying to mess with something that could bring you fortune? It makes zero sense.
I think there's something to say with, you're going to make more money ultimately when you do have the best players playing for something meaningful. But I agree with you that it does have to be one or the other. You have to decide that this is going to be a frivolous, fun thing, or we're going to have some meaning and give players a reason to try. And I do think if they could just simply say, players, you get X amount of dollars for your charity if you compete in this, then I think you'd eventually get guys like LeBron and stuff actually competing in the dunk competition. You'd make events like that matter, whereas it really has. I think All-Star games in general have become irrelevant for the past couple of years. But I think if they do, as you say, have to pick one or the other. They have to make it frivolous or make it a serious thing that they take seriously.
Well, on the other side of the gloves are off, this could go on forever. This really could. Coming up on the other side, Jose Bautista. He may be flying north again. We'll talk about that after the break. It's The Gloves Are Off. I'm Lance Phillips. He's Josh Ryan.
I am.
You are?
Yes.
Yes. And we're going to Jose Bautista. We were originally going to talk about whether or not he was going to come north because there were reports out that he was on the verge of signing a deal. Those reports have now been confirmed. Yes. Ken Rosenthal tweeted, Blue Jays, Bautista have a deal, 1 year, mutual option pending a physical. The announcement expected later in the week. So it looks like Jose Bautista is coming back to the Toronto Blue Jays for at least one season. Do you like this?
As I was saying before to you off camera, I'm not sure if I do or not. On the one hand, it's not a gross financial mistake by them, I think, because they would be getting him for around that $17 million
the qualifying
offer. So essentially, they're not overpaying for him. And I guess the deal does have some incentives. So if he hits certain statistical numbers, I think is how it will work, that he'll actually make extra on top of that 17. In which case, obviously, the Jays will be happy because he's being productive. But I'm not convinced he's going to be productive. I mean, you saw his slugging percentage decline, hitting percentage decline. He's a very ineffective outfielder at this point. I was kind of hoping.
You think he's very ineffective?
Yes,
that's a strong term.
Because his shoulder is so gone. If you watch a couple years ago, he was very effective at that long ball, being able to chuck it into third base if he had to, and he can't get it past second base now. His shoulder's at that point.
I think that that's a bit of a strong term. He still has some outfielding ability. he's had an opportunity to get healthier now in this offseason.
Perhaps.
And given the fact that he expected a much larger contract than he got, and didn't get it, expect him to come back with purpose, shall we say.
I'm certainly sure he'll be motivated, certainly, because he'll want to earn all those dollars. He'll want to show he can still play at this age, and he'll want to, certainly have a chance at winning a championship again. They come so close the last 2 years, but I'm unsure. I'm not super happy. I'm not mad they made the decision, but I don't know. It's a kind of a wait and see how the season starts thing for me.
I don't mind this. I think it's a good deal for the Jays. Coming back on the other side, fair or foul. Got a Super Bowl topic. We're going to discuss some more. Hello, sports fans. It's the Gloves Are Off, and this is coming up for fair or foul. Let's get started right into it. Fair or foul, the New England Patriots will win Super Bowl 51.
About as fair as you can get with predicting NFL results. I mean, you never know week to week what's going to happen, but they do have Tom Brady. They do have Bill Belichick, who's the only real coach in the NFL people would point to as the team that has him has an advantage over every other team. Kind of the same way Nick Saban has that reputation in college football. But at the same time, you got to think Aaron Rodgers is going to stay on a roll. Ben Roethlisberger's nothing to sneeze at, so I don't think by any means this is set in stone. But if you had to pick one, gun to your head, you have to pick one of the four. Nothing wrong with going with the Pats.
There is no gun to my head. There is no gun to my head. I've got Aaron Rodgers. I think it's foul. Aaron Rodgers and the Pack are going to win Super Bowl 51. Haley Wickenheiser, recently retired, as in days old. Is Haley Wickenheiser she is the greatest female Canadian athlete ever. Fair or foul?
I think that's fair. You look at it, there's some other great female athletes in the history of Canadian sports, such as Christine St. Clair, but no one has had the longevity Wickenheiser has had in terms of winning 4 gold medals.
26 years, if I'm not mistaken, she played for the women's national team. That is impressive.
And at least half of that, she was the best player on her team and the best player in the world. She's really transformed women's hockey. So I think
played with men.
Yeah, one of the few to play with men and have some success while doing it.
It's incredible.
So when you come to the Hockey Hall of Fame votes, I think it's a non-issue. Not only is she a great hockey player in the history of hockey, she's greatest female athlete of all time. You could certainly make the argument.
There's no question about the Hall of Fame. She should absolutely be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. She's a trailblazer of sorts.
Absolutely.
She is absolutely a trailblazer for women's hockey, and it's incredible what she has done for the sport, not only for the women's side, but what she's even done for the men's side of the sport. She's gotten male viewers that have typically been viewers of male-only hockey, NHL, OHL, CHL, to now start to enjoy women's hockey. How many times have you been into a bar when there's women's hockey on, and it's full? And it's full of dudes.
It's just as big. It's the women's hockey Olympic hockey game. The gold medal Olympic hockey game has become just as important as the men's Olympic hockey game.
It has.
Remember when they won in Moscow in such dramatic fashion? That was the talk of the tournament, even more than the men winning was.
Well, it's an incredible career for an incredible Canadian. Thanks for tuning into the Gloves Are Off. For Josh Ryan, I am Lance Phillips. 7 days, we'll be back. We got some fun things coming up as well.
Absolutely.